Welcome to Fitness and Consciousness. My guests are Audrey McCann and Lisa Daugherty. They're both yoga teachers and they're on to tell their stories and message. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Ryan, for having us.
Thank you.
So as we'll start with Audrey, how long have you been a yoga teacher and how did you get started with it?
I've been teaching yoga for nearly 8 years now. I was first introduced to the practice of yoga when I was in high school. My dad was involved in health and fitness and owned health spas and natural food store. And so I would read books about it. Didn't really have the traditional asana introduction. It was really about reading about the kriyas and creepy things that people would do, like swallowing gauze and cleaning their nostrils with water and that kind of thing. So it was more of a just explore and see.
Maybe scoot up a little bit.
Pardon me?
No, I think it's okay. A little bit closer.
But yeah, so back in high school, so it's been a long time, 40 years or so since I was first introduced, but the practice got serious about 15 years ago. Yeah.
Where did you start?
In Zionsville, Simply Yoga was probably my most regular practice. It was a class that was about strength, power yoga type class that involved using weights as well. So that really intrigued me. And it was a couple that ran the classes. That one was a fitness trainer, one was a yoga teacher. They uncoupled. And so I had to choose at one point. Was I going to stay with the yoga or go on to more fitness things by following one or the other? And I chose the yoga. It was a great decision on my part, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When did you become an instructor?
8 years ago. Been teach about, over the last 5 years, probably 500 classes a year. So I've got a lot of classes under my belt, mostly group, but lots of private and corporate as well.
Very cool. What about you, Lisa?
I began getting interested in yoga about 20 years ago in a similar way as Audrey, just a casual interest that led to me looking through some books and just trying to understand and mimic what they were saying in the books. And then improvising practices in my living room with my friends and laughing through most of it as we tried to kind of mimic or emulate the shapes that we were seeing in the books, putting on some groovy music and just trying to have a nice time. Getting in touch with our bodies, I think, was that first kind of touchstone. And then I got more serious about it when my oldest daughter, who's now 19, was 1 year old. I took my first yoga classes in a yoga studio and was charmed and challenged initially, and still kind of continue to be, but charmed and challenged. It was a really physical practice that I dove into without even knowing that there were other types of yoga or styles. So I dove into this challenging kind of yoga, an Ashtanga yoga practice, with a really dynamic teacher he sang a lot in class and he gave crazy adjustments in class. And I've said before, at my first yoga class, he had us doing handstands in the middle of the room. And I didn't know that wasn't something that necessarily every yoga class did because I had nothing to compare it to. But luckily, he didn't scare me off. In fact, he kind of lured me in. And I stuck with the practice with him for somewhere just around 3 to 6 months. Unfortunately, he got a little creepy vibe at the end and ended up getting fired from the studio. Yeah, watch yourself. So after he left, it opened the door for me, though, to explore other styles. So I started taking Iyengar classes and Bikram classes and yoga styles called Ananda Yoga, Bliss Yoga. And so that was a fun exploration that continued for another 2 years, just taking regular classes 2 or 3 times a week. And it helped me as a new mom. It helped me as a young parent, in a new relationship with now my partner of many, many years. So it was a very, very, very good thing for me to invest in. And then it got a little more serious once my second daughter was born, and I started to trade for yoga classes. So I would go to the studio and clean the studio in the morning, early morning, before classes started, say 5:30 a.m., in trade for allowing me to take free yoga classes there. And it turned out to be my teacher was there, and his name's Darren Rhodes, at a studio, and I was living in Arizona, a studio called Yoga Oasis in Tucson. And he's still an instructor, and he was a real teacher. He was the real deal. He lived it, he breathed it, and he taught it well. So in this condensed 6 months that I spent with him cleaning the studio in exchange for classes, I learned so much. And again, he had influences on me that still stay with me. He read poetry in class, and sometimes he'd play the didgeridoo in class. And so he left an imprint that I still feel today. And then I moved to Indianapolis after about 6 months with him, and I moved to Indy in 2002. And once I moved here, I felt like I could teach yoga. I kind of gave myself permission to start teaching yoga. So very organically in my neighborhood in Irvington, I moved into Irvington neighborhood, and new friends that I met found out that I knew a bit about yoga, and so they asked if I could teach classes at just local churches in Irvington. So for about 5 years I did that. We just had a Wednesday evening and a Sunday evening class at Our Lady of Lourdes Church and Downey Avenue Church. It was $7 cash drop-in classes. But I learned so much through that because I didn't have any formal training except for taking classes. So in those 5 years in Irvington that I taught the twice weekly classes for our neighborhood, I learned a ton. And I kind of paid my dues because I'd show up sometimes and 2 people would show up, and I'd show up sometimes and 6 people would show up. Sometimes no people would show up. So, I just was persistent. And through that, I had a couple more children, and then entered the world of teaching at studios. So overall, I've been teaching for about 15 years, a little over 15 years. And now I'm primarily at City Yoga near downtown Indianapolis, and up in Zionsville at Blooming Life Yoga, and I do some private and some corporate yoga classes as well.
Yeah, very cool. That's a lot of really good experience starting that long ago. I got my first 2 yoga books when I was 15 at a Grateful Dead concert, and I was really impressed by the pictures at the time, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But it was like all Krishna consciousness stuff. So it was by Prabhupada, you're familiar with, and I guess he was popular with a lot of the hippies in the late 60s and 70s here. And I was just like looking at the art, and it's like there has to be something to this, because you can't have art like that if there isn't some kind of deep spirituality behind it. It's like the more you look at it, the more you could see. And then it was a long time later at my old jiu-jitsu class, there was like a lot of our warm-up looked like yoga stuff. But he didn't call it yoga or anything like that. So did you, getting around to what do you call yoga, and what was your, how has it changed for you over the years, or where you think maybe they have it going wrong now, or what's better now, or?
Yeah, one of the things that Lisa and I think are pretty on the same plane concerning the yoga practice is it's somewhat of a gateway drug. So you try to invite people to a yoga asana class so that they develop their own self-awareness. That is the consciousness piece that everyone's seeking. It is their spiritual connection to something greater than just themselves. So they find out about themselves, but the consciousness then is how do they act in the world? We were just talking about all the kids with the march yesterday. You know, they're standing up for what they believe in, what they want to have happen. They're becoming little activists for something more than just themselves. So through the asana practice, as they get to know themselves and their heart, our students when they're in class, then they can then be more consciously aware as they move out into the world, no matter what they're doing, whether it's, you know, recycling plastic or they're going to eat vegetarian or whatever that is that's of value to them. So I think that the asana practice is what gets people to come to yoga, but then they can find to be a way to become more expansive from there.
Yeah, that makes sense because you can prove that works in a pretty short amount of time, and then you can see it as people stick with it. They become maybe less reactive, more peaceful, more conscious of their imprint on the world. And yeah, my exposure to it was the opposite, but I can see it. But I was into the physical stuff also later on. So what about yours, Lisa?
Yeah. Well, I think, we have a powerful tool at our disposal in that as instructors, we can stand in front of a group of people who are standing on the floor, hopefully with bare feet, and maybe for the first time in a really long time they're doing that, and you're asking them to sense the distribution of their weight between their feet and sense their efforts shift from the balls of their feet to the heels of their feet, and asking them to spread their toes and asking them to charge their legs and stack their spine and soften their shoulders and relax their jaw. And these are all things that through this gaining self-awareness on your mat or with mindful movement practices, it starts to translate, like you both referred to asking yourself, am I in good relations with my neighbors? Am I doing, work in the world that's serving me and others? So these mindful movement experiences can be everything. They can be the foundation of coming to live a life that's full, that's rich, that's in service, that's becoming aware, awakening, being in touch with the earth, getting close to the cycles and the rhythms of the earth, practicing vigorously in the morning or the early part of the day and practicing relaxing in the evening, or, tuning into what your cycle feels like, practicing, a different in the summer than you would in the winter. Just these kinds of things that help us connect to the earth and connect to our cycles and connect to that essence of self-awareness is transformative. It can be transformative.
What do you mean practicing different in the summer than winter?
Mm-hmm. Well, living here in Indiana where we have a significant 4 seasons, you tune into, in the winter, a more introspective possibly practice because the daylight is diminished, so you have more of this kind of reflective nighttime where you can go inward more. And in the summer, where the sunlight is high and bright most hours of the day, it's this extroverted or outpouring of heat and energy and vitality and extroversion that leads to these kind of expanded practices or senses. And that doesn't have to be an always thing. Sometimes in the winter it feels really good to sweat a lot or to move vigorously, of course, but kind of the just tuning into the flow or the feeling of the seasons, the time of day, the circumstances can be another just kind of good way to stoke your intuition and to be with these cycles that are all around us.
Do you have a similar process, Audrey?
Yeah, I'm a gardener, so I'm all about the connection of the cycles of life and the seasons that we live in. It's not our practice alone. Wintertime is about hibernating. I love being in this room with the animal skins and all this connection to nature here. Ultimately, it's our true nature that we're trying to tap into. But the winter is reflective and it's time of conservation, but it's also a time of preparation. You think about the plants under the ground. As long as the ground isn't frozen, it could be very cold, but they're still developing and preparing for spring awakening and growth and that kind of thing. So I think it's very true for me anyway. When I practice, it's a little more gentle through the winter time. It does start to speed up, pick up when it comes springtime. People think about getting into better shape. Maybe they start their yoga practice and it becomes more intense. Maybe where the winter they may have taken off. Some people do that. Some people have it exactly the opposite, where they'll go to yoga because it's hot they can find a hot yoga class in the winter time. So it's kind of working in the opposite direction, but if they're still finding the benefits of the practice, even if it doesn't seem seasonal or cyclical, I think that's okay. But as we age too, I'm 55, it's becoming later in the season for me. So it's more wintertime, and my practice itself has become more internal, like the plants beneath the ground, more preservation and taking care. So yeah, but I'm on board with that, truly, with the seasonal practice.
So do you change your classes that you teach in that way too?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can still have what you would call a vinyasa class or a flow class or something like that, but the intensity and then the message that you're trying to share with people too. I mean, it's not just the movement of the body, it's about what is their experience when they're there. Do you have some small nugget that you can share with them about what's happening at this time with the seasons? Maybe it's connected to something more celestial. We talk about full moon and the effects that the moon has on us, and if it affects the oceans, and I'm mostly made of water, then we know that the moon has an effect on me too. So it's nice to bring those kind of stories into your class, and it changes with the seasons. And not everybody's a gardener, but everybody has a garden, and that's their body, and we're trying to help them care for their garden. So yeah.
Do you do the same thing, Lisa? Switch your classes as the season goes?
I'm gonna jump on this right here. Lisa is the best storyteller when it comes to a yoga teacher in a class, and she is just the best at that. So it changes all the time.
I was just going to ask about the stories. We were talking about a little bit about stories before we started recording, and there's a story at the end of all my classes, and it's usually like one of the kids that reads them. Maybe it's a old Native American story, maybe from India, but usually like some kind of ancient story. But so what kind of stories are you telling?
Mm-hmm. Well, in keeping with this kind of theming around mindful movement experiences, raising awareness, and tapping into a connection to nature, not only the natural world, but the nature of the human soul. That gives me lots of good options. So, in the springtime, I get inspired by nature a lot, and by being, while I don't live somewhere really, really rural, but in Zionsville, we're really blessed that there's a lot of green space, and I have easy access to green space from my house. So even just the simplest walk in the woods, and then it inspires me to teach a yoga class that leads you metaphorically or leads you through storytelling as if you're taking a walk in the woods, as if you can visualize yourself on a beautiful spring day, entering the woods, what that shift in smells and the texture under your feet and the sunlight coming in on your face, what that feels like, and just kind of trying to utilize these visualizations to kind of enliven the senses and the imagination. I was just spent the morning with my nieces and nephews today, and they range in age from 6 to 2 years old, and there's like 5 of them. So, and on the car ride home, I said to my husband, I said, I love being around little kids, kind of as long as they don't come home with me, but nonetheless, maybe I have a childlike quality to me in that I love listening to the imagination of small children, and from working with children and being around children that is something that I want adults to be able to at least access every once in a while. Swing on the monkey bars. Remember what it's like to feel the joyful abandon in your body that children just naturally have, and the imaginative qualities of, I can imagine myself walking through the woods. I can imagine looking down and seeing the first daffodils poking out through the ground. I can imagine, watching crows fly overhead. So those are things that inspire my storytelling in yoga class. Is a lot of its connection to nature. And
so you're using the story as like a guided meditation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, I just get on my mat and I say, well, what does a walk in the woods on a yoga mat feel like? And, that can be, it can stretch what yoga is, because I love yoga poses, but maybe it was in reference to your earlier question about what's changed in the yoga experience over the years and maybe what we're moving away from. And personally, kind of what I'm moving away from and what I think some of the trend in the yoga global national yoga movement is kind of a little bit less rigidity in the body and more spirals and more circles and more flowing or natural type movements, functional movements. I'm interested in things like swinging and squatting and crawling. And so when I can incorporate some things that feel like that into a yoga class, that goes along with like a walk in the woods, or goes along with some sort of broad-ranging theme where you can squat and you can pretend like you're feeling the first, warm earth underneath your hands as you're in a squat and you put your hands on the ground. Or you can feel yourself grow like a sapling when you come up out of your squat to stand up tall and lift your arms overhead like branches of a tree. I mean, it sounds simplistic, but it's effective.
Yeah, do you do storytelling also, or how do you...
You know what? I am a river when I teach a class. I come in and try to get a feel for the people that are there, and you listen to their conversation before class starts, and they tell you a lot about what they want or need. Maybe not directly, but you get a feel for that. And so based on season, time of day, number of people in the class, you sort of develop the class almost on the spot. But when it starts, you read their bodies, you feel their energy, and you go with your experience that you've had. So I'm not a very good word storyteller. I'm more about them embodying the practice. The time that they're on the mat, it may not be a definite start and a stop to like how this sequence is going to go. It's going to go the way the class sort of allows it to flow. So I'm sort of that ilk. And you get into a class with me, it starts and then you ride along and then it ends. And it's just the experience that you're having in that time period that I'm hoping that, you have this greater connection to you as being a part of nature. So that's really the direction that I like to go in as a teacher. Because I would forget if I started telling a story about one of my kids or, what's happening in life that I'm supposed to make some sort of connection. Sometimes then I forget about the people in the room and I'm more about the story, So that's for me is a kind of a place that I want to try to stay in my own little river there.
Yeah, and I think we are good for each other, Audrey and I, because she does have a way of reading bodies and reading energies in the room, whereas, I kind of come in hoping to create an experience for people. But you're right, Audrey, and you may know this too from teaching classes, is that when you walk into the room as the instructor, often people are really chatty and people are checking in with each other and there's a buzz in the room, and then you're like, okay, there's some high energy in here tonight. Maybe I want to ground them, but I want to also challenge them to kind of expel some of this franticness
right.
or some of this.
And is it a coffee buzz, or are they just excited to be there? You got to know what the difference is for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you can walk in a room and everybody's laying down on their back. They've got a hand on the heart, and it's quiet in the room. And that's going to be a different experience. And you want to allow for that. If everyone's doing that, laying on their back, eyes closed, holding their heart, I'm not going to walk in and go, okay, chair pose, forward fold, high lunge, right away. You need to help them kind of get into it, leave whatever it is that they're holding in their heart, kind of, let that, give them space for that.
I think back to an earlier piece of that is the movement of yoga and where is it going, good or bad or whatever. When you're wanting a very active class too, to be careful that it doesn't become just this fitness class. We're wanting them to move, but really be consciously aware of all those movements. What is the activation of the energy centers of the body, trying to bring those kind of things in. Some philosophy, history pieces, that may be part of the story that comes into the class, because what we're trying to help them find too is that, this ancient practice is then something you take out into the world. Mm-hmm. So teaching them about the 8-limb path and little nuggets, not trying to go up and say, okay, here is the story of yoga I give to you kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's just like little threads. What can you take home and how can you live your yoga?
Do your classes have different names? So do you offer, so people can kind of know by the name of it what they're going to be getting, or?
Yeah. Naming yoga classes these days is this funny anomaly of confusion and muddy waters, because I could go to a vinyasa, which would just be indicative that the class would move, and it would move with breath. So that's your broad definition of vinyasa, but it's so broad that I might teach a vinyasa class where we don't get up off the floor. Audrey might teach a vinyasa class where we do high lunge and chair pose a lot. And that doesn't mean that she's right and I'm wrong or vice versa, but the waters are muddy. So hopefully we're giving clear enough descriptions. And, Audrey and I don't necessarily, it's more of our studio managers and things like that direct this through their descriptions on the websites of, what's a vinyasa class? What's that going to mean? And we'll try to stick to that, because we don't want people to be in a class that's not right for them. If they're brand new to yoga or if they're recovering from an illness, they probably shouldn't start out at a hot power vinyasa class. They might do all right, but they might sabotage themselves too. Whereas, they'll never come back to a yoga class because they'll go, gosh, that was too hot. It was too fast. And you're like, well, it was your first one, and you were sick last week. So maybe you weren't in the right place for it. Or so there is a lot of, as a practitioner, if you're looking for a specific studio, a specific style, a specific class, read the descriptions, go in with an open mind, ask some questions of your friends and family or people who've been to the studio, ask questions maybe of the manager, certainly of the instructor. Hey, am I going to sweat in this class, or am I going to meditate in this class? Am I going to do both? I want to learn breathing techniques. Is this a class where I can learn breathing techniques? And just kind of seek out those answers. And I know it's asking a lot, and you're overall, hopefully you're going to be held in a good space no matter what class you come to, but there certainly is not a very good overall catch-all for yoga. Though certainly certain styles, Ashtanga is its own thing, and it will always only be its own thing. You're not going to get much diversity in an Ashtanga class. I don't mean diversity of people, but I just mean diversity of poses. It's a memorized set practice.
It's like a Catholic mass, no matter where you go, right?
Right.
Same thing all over the place.
So that's something you can rely on. So if you like that consistency, that might be the style for you. And a lot of times what I tell people, because sometimes friends of mine will go, I'm sorry I don't go to your yoga classes, but I go to the studio that's right by my house. And I'm like, that's great, because really, if it's convenient for you, it's a good time of day for you, and you resonate with the instructor, stick to it. Don't worry. I've got students in my classes. I love you, and I would love if I see your face sometimes, but if you're going to a studio that you like, it's close to your house, and it works, stick to it.
Yeah, well, you were saying, Audrey, when you start off your classes, you don't know what you're going to do. Maybe you have an idea of what you'll do first. You're reading the class. And then, so what you're saying is you don't have a prearranged sequence in mind. You're just kind of seeing what everybody does and seeing this is a more advanced group that showed up today. We can work more on hand balances or a new hand balance or something like that. But you don't have this set method. That's kind of how I do my classes too. It kind of just depends who shows up and let it fly. So with the more classes like Ashtanga or Bikram, where it's going to be the same thing every time, do you think there's a problem with only doing that? Can it lead to injuries, or what's your view on that? Or if you're always doing, we can start with that one, but what about always doing hot yoga? Is there too much of it? Is it what is maybe too hot, or maybe that's a lot of questions to throw at once,
it's a very good question. I like where you're going with that. As a teacher now, for the period of time that I've been teaching, and mostly in studios and with classes that are generally pretty vigorous, I've seen people end up with repetitive use injuries, which is sort of commonplace. If you were only to do kettlebell swings, over and over, there's going to be something that's happening there where you're going to throw your body out of balance over time. If you don't find other ways to move the body to create balance. So unfortunately, we do see some of those things happen. I can't say specifically that hot yoga is too much for anybody. I know people that will only do hot yoga. I know people that will only do a vinyasa class that they can flow on their own and do their own thing, which is great. If that is what takes you to the place where you're connected most with yourself, then I'm all for it. One thing that I always like to think, and if I don't always say it in a class, I am always thinking it. The good work that you do for yourself not only benefits you, but everyone around you. Because then if you can be present in the moment when you're talking to your kids without flying off the handle, when there's something that doesn't fit for you, or you're in traffic and I'm going to have a meltdown if this light doesn't turn, is that practicing my yoga? Can I just sit with this for a minute and be okay and see that life's moving on at the pace that it needs to move? Mm-hmm. So I think it is something that, you just have to go with that.
I think I guess at this point, though, I like to project my opinions onto to what I'm seeing culturally in the yoga community. Really, I truly can only speak from my experience, being that just doing yoga wasn't serving my body. I needed to add some more strengthening elements to my practice, because in yoga classes, we don't get pulling actions. We do a lot of pushing, but we're missing out on some significant functional body movements and training ourselves to stabilize our joints, not just stretch our muscles. So certainly practicing Ashtanga or strictly hot yoga, can be fine. You can be fine, but I think you'll find that your practice is more sustainable if you balance it with either other strength training and or relaxation training, just to serve all the parts of you, not just the part of you that likes the adrenaline rush of a really vigorous practice that you know inside and out. Because I think the body wants to find other ways to move, not just one set of 72 or 26 of always the same poses. There's benefit to that. There's a discipline and there's a commitment to that kind of practice. But I believe that the body, needs to dance sometimes too.
I think we've both tapped into that in the last year, the strength training aspect, bringing that more into our bodies too, and not just having a yoga practice, because the last 8 years for sure, for me, has been pretty much strictly asana. And now by having a fitness activity, working out in a gym more often, I've enjoyed finding out more about other aspects of the yoga practice, more breath work, more meditation, more how to use your yoga off the mat into the world, being more actively aware that way too. So, yeah.
Yeah, you reminded me of, like when you're talking about literally stretching, like trying to pry the joints apart. So I'm certified through Strong First, and the founder is Pavel Tsatsouline, and his way of stretching is, well, it varies, but one of the things is all right, say I can go instead of just trying to do splits, and I'm trying to relax everything and just pry down and push down all my weight as hard as I can, that maybe instead of being fully out like that, to come up an inch and work the strength at that range, and then maybe I can go down another inch and a quarter, so that'd be a quarter inch past where I started, or what my max would have been. So do you think that the over stretching without the strength, turning the splits into it's a stretch, but you can also have it as a strength move. Do you think that that's what, or the lack of that is what is causing the injuries?
I think consistency of practice, and sometimes not being aware of what you're doing in your body. I've heard people say, I blew out my hamstring doing a triangle pose. Why? Well, the mat was slippery. They weren't ready for the pose. I mean, there could be a number of reasons why something can happen, but it's still going back to that conscious awareness. What's happening in my body when I'm here on the mat at this time, too? Seeing people doing improper chaturangas over years, and then they have to tape their shoulders, or they have shoulder surgeries, that kind of thing. I mean, I think it can happen no matter what your activity is. There can be injuries with it, and yoga is no different. But it's really preparing the body, being aware of what's happening in your body when you're on the mat. Having good instruction helps a lot too. And when most teachers are coming out of a 200-hour teacher training, trust me, I know when I first came out, I did not feel qualified to teach a yoga class. I felt like I could work with the people that I was already practicing with, because that was the level that I understood. But somebody that has an advanced practice, they sometimes forget what the beginner student needs, and how to be that beginning student. So something, I can't remember who said it, but this is not a practice of teacher to student. It's student to student. You're still a student even as a teacher. You're still learning all the time. You're looking at people's bodies, and you're trying to help them embody the practice. You want to add to that, Lisa?
Yeah. I'm with your Strength First. Is that what it's called?
Strong First.
Strong First. Yeah. Founder or teacher. In that I felt passive stretching for me was not helpful at a certain point, and it was about stabilizing. It was about drawing, making my muscles strong before I got to end range motion, because I can fall into an end range motion of splits or a foot behind the head or whatever, but without the contraction of my muscles around that joint, then the joint just destabilizes. And like you said, it kind of gets pried apart. And those joints don't just magically come back together. So it has been over the past, not quite as long as Audrey, but for me, maybe, 6 to 9 months of working on making strength a priority, personally, to help with the stability of these poses that can be extreme expressions that you just don't normally, you don't normally in everyday life do a triangle pose or a splits pose or something. But the foundation of these asanas is part of what we do every day. I feel like when we train our bodies, like then when there's ice outside, you're more likely to not slip and fall. Or if you do slip, your ankle can hold that slip a little better than if you don't have this experience of being aware in your body or training your body or spending time with these kinds of practices.
So it sounds like if both of you are in the last year or whatever it was getting it into more of the strength part, would you say that's missing from yoga teacher training? Like when I was taking yoga classes regularly, sometimes I was planning on being a teacher, so sometimes I would go to 2 or maybe even 3 per day, 2 in a row, maybe once in the morning, 2 at night.
Wow.
And
good for you.
Yeah, well, and then it was like, but something like seemed like it was missing, and the teacher was supposed to be really good, but then there was like some creepy reports. You may know who I'm talking about. I'll even say it, Santosha, and he has since moved. I think the place is still there, so he's not there anymore. And the reason why I'll say it is because I was told by a couple of the women themselves what he was doing. So it's not like just hearsay. I heard it directly from them. I doubt they would lie. But anyways, the more of the point was I saw him, like there was one of the girls he was like cranking her foot behind her head, and this wasn't like the inappropriate that I'm talking about just a second ago, but like inappropriate adjustments, and she was clearly in a lot of pain, and he'd like start out like, oh, just be where you are today, don't force it, and then he's just cranking her foot. She's clearly struggling, and then she ended up having like some low back SI problems, and I don't know why I can't think of the name, that nerve that gets...
The sciatica.
Yeah, sciatica nerve. Mm-hmm. And so she had all that, and it was like, that's why, is because he's... So do you think that that's something that's like going away, that there's like a new generation that are more in line with what you're talking about, that have been doing this for 20 years and like, no, this isn't how we do it anymore, this isn't how you're supposed to do it, or what's the...
I think that those kind of things have been happening since the beginning of yoga. When you hear there's been conversations with the yogis for a long time that there's like discord between what's too much of an adjustment, what's not enough of an adjustment. A couple of things about the yoga practice. Non-harming is a huge part. We're talking about that as our own practice, but as teachers, non-harming our students is a big part. But there's this thing of effort and ease. So you want to have that strength where you're putting effort into the posture, but you need to find comfort too. So the ease is what we're trying to help them seek, so that in difficult times when they're feeling uptight, rigid, stressed out, you can find a way to calm yourself down. And it doesn't have to be by external means. So that's where the practice of the asana on the mat can help translate out into the world. Yeah.
And I have, for most of my teaching, have erred on the side of caution. I don't really care that much if you get into the hardest yoga poses. You can go to other teachers if you want that. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of thrown up my hands and said, I'm cool with that. Like, I don't. So my classes tend to err on the side of I want the weakest, most least flexible person in the room to have a good experience, and I'm gonna maybe not tone it all the way down to that, but maybe just a level or two above that, because to me it's just, I don't know, it's not a gamble that I'm willing to take. And I've become okay with that over the years. So if you want to do super crazy yoga poses, you're going to go to a different instructor than me. Unless maybe you hire me privately and then we can do handstands and then we can do stuff. I don't know, maybe, whatever. That usually doesn't happen. People kind of know my feel, and I'm good with that. But I guess just as an instructor, so I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of, the Santosha guy, or I've seen one of my favorite teachers really crank people into poses that they probably weren't ready for. And you kind of, you're cheering in some ways, like there's this momentum in the room that cheers it on. And I think the instructor gets a little bit of an ego filling by making this happen for this student, and the student wants this badly for him or herself. So it can take on its own like propulsive kind of energy that it probably isn't serving the practice that Audrey just referred to of non-harming, effort and ease. So we're slowly, I think, shifting out of this glorified extreme poses. There'll always be contortionists, there'll always be Cirque du Soleil, but a lot of them have joint and ligament diseases, problems.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So it's some personal responsibility as a practitioner of saying, these are my boundaries. I want to do my best yoga practice. I would love to get this pose if I can, but know that maybe I will never do a wheel pose or never do a handstand in the middle of the room, and make some peace with that. If that's, if that looks like where the direction the needle's pointing.
One thing we can go back to is that whole connection to nature. You can plant seeds with your students, help them develop the poses that help prepare them for the more challenging poses. And if you're not in a group setting where the whole class is sort of ready to move towards this bigger posture or whatever, then that's when they're ready to go on to the teachers that are ready to take them beyond. Mm-hmm. But then you have to check in with them too. And it's like, is your practice about quieting your mind, or is it trying to achieve this shape of your body that is a pose, right? Are you being the poser, or are you going to be a yoga practitioner? So you got to help them check in with what is their motivation too.
Yeah, there's that joint laxity disease, Ehlers-Danlos. What is it? Ehlers-Danlos something
like that.
I can't remember the name of it, but I'm in like some yoga groups on Facebook, and there's a lot of posts like yoga for people with that, and they would say stuff like they would go to a yoga class and they could do this extreme bendy pose with extreme flexibility, and people are like, oh, you're really good at that, and they don't want to hear that because they didn't work for that. That's their problem. So they're like, don't compliment me on this joint disease that I have. I'm here for stability and stuff. So I think it's this weird, like, competitive thing where, and it's, I like being competitive sometimes. I like martial arts. I like lifting weights, and it's fun when you're with people that are around your same level or even way above you, working out with somebody that's like way stronger than me, or doing jujitsu with a guy who's way better, and I'm just getting beat up the whole time. But as long as it's like, respectful, that's really cool. So it seems to be like there's this, like the competitive thing and all the Instagram pictures and stuff, which is cool, but it's like you're kind of selling something that it shouldn't be. But maybe that's kind of how a lot of this like modern yoga started, is like with Joyce and Iyengar. There was like, you have to sell it, so you have to like stand there in these weird poses and do this extreme thing. Because if you're just sitting there in meditation, that's hard to sell. So maybe it's like what you were saying before, is like is this gateway. Like people think they want to be able to do all this cool stuff, but really they just want to learn how to like sit still or breathe through these difficult situations that have nothing to do with like being in a yoga class. And I had a yoga instructor on, J.P. Rowley, who you may be aware of him. He went through City Yoga, I do believe. And he's he thinks there's only 2 black male yoga teachers in the
Charles
city.
Crenshaw is the other one, probably.
What's his name?
Charles Crenshaw is also.
Yeah, so 2 black male yoga teachers. And so I had heard about yoga for well over 20 years, reading tons and tons of books. And so I've like read this before, but like yoga is like putting yourself in more difficult positions and learn how to breathe calmly. And so, but when JP was talking about it, like there's maybe some situations that he's in that are, as a black male, and he's trying to teach other like young black males, and just kind of like the way he put it, as being able to like breathe through that. Like maybe it's like with the police or something like that, but being able to like breathe in those situations, and it kind of, it expanded that same thing that I already knew yoga. That's what yoga is, right. But it kind of he really expanded it for me, talking about it from that perspective.
That's awesome. Yeah. So just a couple things came up when you were sharing, and the first one is that the Instagram yogi, which is I think that's the name of it now, is the yogi that's often wearing not very many clothes and usually on a beach or a mountaintop somewhere and doing an extreme, or it's a beautiful, aesthetically gorgeous looking pose. But what you don't see in that post is all the years, hopefully, that he or she trained to be able to do that, the sacrifices that he or she made. And then you also don't see, but are they a nice person? Are they good to their family or things like that?
Yeah, just because you can put your foot behind your head doesn't make you a good yogi. You can still be an asshole and do that,
right. So that was my kind of thought about that. But then going back to what you said about JP, and I just know him just a little bit through a few encounters at City Yoga. But like he's tapping into something that's really needed. And luckily in the global yoga community, there's things like the Prison Yoga Project, where instructors are donating their own time and skills to work with the prison population, because if anyone has more challenges to feeling liberated and feeling free, you can't look, prisoners are in that spot. So if we can bring this practice, if we can have these gifted people who are taking the practice out into these unexpected places and touching populations that may never step into a yoga studio or never buy a yoga mat or post on Instagram. If there's these people doing this and reaching these populations, it's a really important part, and a part that we all, I think, I'm sitting amongst comrades here. We all want to see this continue and see it flourish and see these opening doors for this practice, which really, like you said, it can be transformative no matter if you are in Hawaii in a bikini doing a crazy pose or you're behind bars. It can touch lots of different people in lots of different ways, and we need to make sure that in the best way possible it is doing just that and reaching people that may not have access to it.
Locally, we offer indie yoga movement, so they take yoga into the classrooms, some at the inner city schools, some out in the suburbs. It's fantastic. Lisa and I were talking on the way over that, some schools are initiating like a meditation room rather than detention. So it becomes something that, to quiet your mind, to be still, which is so not what our world is right now. It's very kinetic.
Yeah, it would be cool if they taught like meditation or yoga in schools. Start the day that way. Gym class includes that kind of stuff. And I knew of a yoga teacher that was teaching at the juvenile detention for boys, and it's like on 25th and Keystone. So there's kids there that probably like killed people or did, I don't know, maybe that would send them to like the main jail, but they did some bad stuff, whatever it is. And she was going in there, and it sounded like for the most part, this was a few years ago or so, and it sounded like for the most part she was like really touching some people. And then of course you have like some of them that are like, what's your favorite position? And this kind of like being silly teenage boys and stuff, but it did sound like she was really touching some people. So it just like, how do we like get the real message out to more people, and in the places that need it the most, that may be like I was talking with JP about like, well, why isn't it more popular with black people? Is it just because they just don't want to? Or do they think that it's not for them? And so he like, so it kind of had like all the above answer, I believe it was, but it can be for everybody. And like with him, he does it like more as this athletic thing. He does it for the spirituality too. He's the guy is really awake, I think, but he comes at it as this, like, this is going to help your basketball. This is going to help your football. So he's speaking to them. He's starting out talking to them where they already are. They're not, if you go to some poor neighborhood and you're talking about, Krishna or something like that, you're probably not going to get anywhere.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So how...
You have to meet people where they are, no matter what your teachings are. Yeah. Sorry.
That's right. So who are like some of your biggest inspirations? Who are you like currently studying for yoga? It sounds like you both go to each other's classes, or at least train together sometimes. And like, who are you learning from these days?
Well, we're learning from each other hugely right now. I'm not following any, yoga celebrities, whatever you want to call them, the people out of Instagram. I don't do Instagram or Twitter or that kind of thing. I'm aware of all of that going on. To me, it seems very competitive, and it's very like yelling. Like I'm always having to yell at pay attention to me sort of vibe from the people that are always in front of me doing it. So I've initiated, and Lisa and I have been doing it a few months now, is a teacher circle where the teachers come together and we talk about what is it that we want to present as a group, as a community of yoga teachers. Are we maintaining the history, the philosophy of the practice? How do we have this ancient practice and make it modern so that we can live within this space? Now that we're awake, now that we're ready, what are we supposed to do with this? That's what we're sort of checking in with right now. And it's been fabulous for me to be able to sit back and then look and see, okay, from what I've learned in this time period, all the teachers that I've studied with, all the different, certifications, blah, blah, blah that you get, but what do you do with it now? So that's where I'm going, is like, we've developed this, we have this little beautiful package, so how do we serve the world with this package now? So that's something that we're hoping to sort of uncover still and present.
And I follow a ton of people. And not necessarily, well, what I'm looking for is some of this activist kind of yoga vein, or what would it be, like even a little bit of the trauma-informed training, some of the inclusivity branches of people in the global yoga communities. So there's a woman named Carol Horton, and she has a PhD. She's a political science professor. I might get this wrong, at the University of Chicago. I know she's in Chicago, but she's a professor there and also a yogi. So she looks at political implications of yoga practices and diversity in yoga, just what we were talking about, like why are African Americans underrepresented as yoga instructors or practitioners, looking at some of these questions. So I follow, and she doesn't post a lot, but I loosely, and these are all just kind of me being fangirl. This guy he's out of Santa Monica, California, named Julian Walker, and he grew up in South Africa as a white man in the 80s in South Africa. So he has this amazing kind of story of, I think his parents were resistors to this apartheid policies, and he runs, he calls it Dance Tribe. And so he does ecstatic dance combined with yoga on Tuesdays and Thursday nights in Venice Beach in Santa Monica, California. And I'm just dying to go to one of his dance tribes sometime. I will be in Southern California and attend. But he'll get anywhere from 40 to 80 people doing dance tribe. And he wants it to be a really inclusive experience as well. It's only $10 or $15 cash at the door if you've got that. Hala Kuri, she's also in Southern California, and she's part of the Off the Mat Into the World founders with Sean Korn and Suzanne Sterling, and our dear Nikki Myers, our founder at City Yoga. So, that's kind of who I follow. And I follow some of the rabble-rousers too a little bit, some of the people who are trying to like break the system a little, because I'm I'm into some deconstructing right now of the status quo. So that feels good to me. And then I've also just in the past, I think it's gone along with the strength training, the past 9 months or something, just try not to take myself so seriously, just only follow the yogis that are, walking the straight and narrow. I've opened up to listening to podcasts of more kind of troublemaking people, or podcasts about sex or kinky sex, or following these people who like comedians and things, where I want to free my mind. I want to free myself so that I'm not taking myself so seriously, because I have a tendency to do that, I think, and just think, morally righteous is boring. Exactly. I don't know. So that may be more than you wanted to know, but yeah.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned some of that. I did a couple of podcasts. They're actually the only ones that I deleted with my girlfriend about authentic sex, and we were getting into we mainly did it to not embarrass her kids very much because they're in high school, and what if one of her daughters said something to her, or one of her daughter's friends said something like, "Do you know your mom has a podcast?" And it was really explicit, kind of where Tantra meets Taoism, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Multi-orgasmic man, how does that work? What does that mean? And then her own experiences with that, and with meeting me and doing this kind of like different stuff. But we deleted those, but we're trying to figure out how we can do that in a less embarrassing way to her kids if it did end up being something like that. But not taking like things too seriously. It made me think of there's a Netflix documentary now on Osho. Have you seen any of that? Mm-hmm. I saw it's like I think a 6-part series, and I saw 3. And I've read several of Osho's books over the years. He was never like my guru or anything, but I thought he was this interesting guy with 20 Rolls Royces, and he's kind of like the anti-guru guru. And then I found out like what he was doing like in Oregon and stuff, like this community. It was like this crazy story. But there was this one documentary called Kumare. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. So Kumare is his real name is Vikram Gandhi. But he was like this college student who decided his parents were from India, but he was born in New Jersey. And he decided, so he starts looking into these other like gurus, like, is this real? What are they doing? So he goes to India, and his grandma does like these rituals and prayers and stuff. And so he decides to fake an Indian accent. He sounded like an American. He was here his whole life. And he goes out west to be this guru. And so he grows out his hair, grows out his beard. He's carrying like Shiva's staff around all the time, and he's just making stuff up. And he makes up a meditation, and he's making up yoga postures and stuff, and people buy it. And then so at the end, he like does this. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but at the end he unveils his true self. He shaves, puts on like a button-up shirt, Western button-up shirt, like how he would normally dress. And it was like some people were like, that was cool, good job of the students. And then some people were like, I'm never going to talk to you again, because there were these like yoga teachers that saw him as this great guru, and he was but he never took any money from anybody. It was all just for the documentary. And he always just said, no, I'm the same as you. You don't really need a guru. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, yes, you're a guru. It drew them in even more, so you can see how people can fake it. And there is a big line of fakers from like India, America, everywhere really, that they kind of make up something that you can't really prove or disprove and sell it. So it's like we kind of got to be careful what we're paying attention to, and like you're saying, like not take yourself too seriously, but maybe that guy with the long hair and beard isn't as spiritual as he's making himself up to be. But you mentioned Sean Corn. I've been following along to like her DVDs. I've known about her for a while, but this year my only New Year's resolution really was to do 108 yoga sessions by the end of the year, and I'm on pace to do that, and along with all my other workout stuff, but just to kind of like prove some stuff to myself. It's like, what is this? What can it really do? Like the chakras, is that real, or is it not? I saw like the Sahasrara chakra in a dream state, and it was like this. It was really cool, but it's like, what is the heart chakra really? Are we talking about nerve plexuses? Are we talking about something that's in the spine? It's not in this body. And so I guess that's what's leading up to my next question. Like, what have you proven to yourselves that may be more esoteric? Like for myself, I've proved that like the microcosmic orbit is real. I can feel it. I can use it. I can prove it to myself anyway. So do you get into the chakra stuff? What is your like opinion or experience?
Mm-hmm. So good question. A couple things kind of came to mind. I too am with you. I don't think that we can necessarily prove the existence of chakras, though I do like to, again, maybe it's the imagination. I do like to imagine them. And there must be something to the idea that we have a luminous energy body, or we have an energy body, a vibration, a resonance that extends beyond the flesh and bones. So that may be dealing with the chakras in that there's concentrated areas of this energy body in these specific locations on the body that then we've assigned meaning to because of where they're located, and maybe because of experiences that people have in relation to them. And teaching people about that, I think, is a good thing. I think can be helpful to people to, and even if it's just like we keep going back to this awareness, even if it's just an awareness, but they can access it by learning that there is an energy center in your belly. And if that helps them be more aware of what they're physically ingesting and digesting and eliminating, or through their senses, not just their mouth, but through, what they watch, what they read, who they hang out with, if they're digesting, ingesting, and eliminating through this center in the belly, then if that helps them in their life, which I think it can, then that can be a good thing. Personally, I've had powerful experiences doing pranayama. I think pranayama, while you should be careful and move slowly, don't dive into the deep end right away, but working with your breath can be a really powerful way to change consciousness or to awaken consciousness. Through meditations, I've had some emotional releases and openings that have felt like they were facilitated by the practice of me just sitting and being disciplined about sitting and being. And then whether it's through intuition, which I think that a yoga practice, a mindful movement practice, can enhance your powers of intuition. And I sometimes feel really on it with that kind of thing, and sometimes not so much. But so being able to become more intuitive can be a helpful aspect of this practice. And then, something happened last night that solidified it for me, is that the earth is always communicating with us. The trees and the plants and the animals are always communicating with us, is what I believe. And are you listening? Are you responding? I also think that the trees and plants and animals and earth listen to us. They listen to what we're putting out. And are you putting out things that are toxic to the world through your words or deeds and thoughts? So yeah, these are all like qualities that I think have been helped by being a yogi.
What about yours?
Yeah, to step back a little bit, we were talking about a false guru is out there and presenting himself as something, and people follow that person because they're seeking. And I find that everybody that starts with a yoga practice, there's something they want to change. Mm-hmm. There's something in their life that is unsettled in some way, whether it's in their mind, in their heart, or in their body in some way. They're seeking some sort of difference. And so when you allow somebody to embody these experiences, that's where the change can then take place. And so if you can bring their awareness to the different parts of their body through visualization, you're just telling them to think about those places. You actively engage those places through asana movements, the strength, or in some cases it needs to be the stretch, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, tightening down, engaging the muscles around a certain joint, trying to find the strength in something. Or if it's something that if somebody's very tight, you want to help them loosen up. You want them to soften. Mm-hmm. So as teachers, we're trying to help them. If you're already powerful, strong, and tight, then you need to find ease. If you're very loosey-goosey and you flop into some pose, then you need to work on your strength. So that's where we're reading this class and trying to direct them. I'm a person that at one time I weighed a lot more than I weigh now, but there comes a point when you don't want to look at yourself if you have too much weight on you. And I think sometimes we get disconnected from looking at ourselves, not just in a reflection in glass or in a mirror or something like that, but you're not looking at the inside of you. And we have a person that we've known and we follow and think is really cool, and her name is Dr. Sue Morter. And she's put it probably in one of the simplest terms about understanding the chakras of the body as energy centers, as color, because when we get here, when we become human, we end up as a splat. And so we try to spend all this time on this planet putting ourselves back together. And so through self-awareness, through certain practices, we can do that. And I think for me, more than anything, is like things about trusting your gut. If you have an understanding when something upsets you, I have a slight stomach ache, you need to believe that the body's talking to you. Body is nature. Mm-hmm. It's the one and the same. You lose a friend, someone is sick, your heart hurts. You think too much, you're all up in your mind about things that you have to deal in your life. You have a headache. I mean, that is the energy of what's happening in your life is manifesting in your body, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, for me, it was one of those times when you had to just get settled and say, my body hurts. I'm not taking care of it. I'm not eating right, so I need to change how I eat. I'm not, physically moving about my day in a comfortable way, so I need to become stronger, or I need to lose weight, or whatever the case may be. But it was really through the practice of sitting with all these spaces in my body, whether they're colored, spinning, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't really matter. Whether you know what those things are, once you just help somebody embody that, things, the physical that you feel, there's a reason for all those things. Yeah.
What do you think about like Kundalini yoga as like a separate thing? Because to me, it was like, isn't that what it kind of all is at some point? Or like, even if the chakras are just like states of consciousness or awareness, or like, psychological things, or whatever it is as you move up, or balanced, or however you want to think about it. But the reason I'm asking is because I was, since the beginning of the year, and I told you, I've been doing yoga on and off for a long time, and, depending on your definition, maybe every day for a long, forever. But, so I'm getting like these, I've read Kundalini yoga books before, and I've had this experiences like the energy going up my spine, like I was talking about the microcosmic orbit. Depending on how you're thinking about it, maybe that's Kundalini might be an easier or a better explanation, or is it the same thing? But anyways, I can feel it for sure. But when I was like getting these Kundalini yoga DVDs and following along with them, which is part of this New Year's resolution thing, it was like some of it was like Gurmukh, and I think there was, I forget another guy's name, but it was like, this, I think you're just messing with me, or you are tricked. Yogi Bhajan is a fraud. I'm pretty sure Yogi Bhajan was a fraud. Or maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I knew enough to know he was a fraud, but maybe I don't know enough to know that, no, actually he wasn't. Mm-hmm. So do you have, like, what's your like experience or thoughts on like the Kundalini, whether it is a separate kind, or like just what are your...
I'm an out on the Kundalini. That's all you, Lisa.
I know. Well, and you're not talking, you're not hosting to Kundalini practitioners particularly. I have a little bit of a working knowledge, but certainly not as much as, maybe have Diane Hancock or have some other of the Kundalini instructors here in town on, and she could probably give you an earful. But overall, yeah, is Kundalini an energy in the body, a dormant serpent that leads to awakening of the chakras or of the spinal column or of the Shakti at the base of the spine? Maybe. I don't know for sure. I've felt energy in my spine, but I've never had like a big illumination, like a Shaktipat or something like that. I'm interested in hearing from people who have had those experiences, and I think it's interesting, and I just kind of try to take it case by case to see how much validity that it feels for me. Yogi Bhajan, I've thought the exact same thing. And even my husband has taught Kundalini yoga numerous times before. And he's kind of, while he was trained as a yoga instructor, he hasn't been specifically trained as a Kundalini instructor. So he's in a little bit of that wiggle room of, he wasn't trained specifically through Kundalini, but he'd practiced it enough and was kind of given permission by, a little bit by Diane and other mentors of his to offer Kundalini classes. So I get some from him, but like you, and he and I have both thought, like, I think Yogi Bhajan made that up, or I think that somebody associated with him made that up, because really, some of it seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous. And then some of it feels effective and powerful. So do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? I don't know. I know some people love it and it's their style, and you can go to City Yoga on a Friday night for a gong night Kundalini meditation with Diane, and the room will be packed. It'll be packed with people who are looking for just that specific thing that's a little different than what Audrey and I offer. They'll come in and they're not really wearing athleta clothes or whatever. They've got on like baggy, flowy white clothes and maybe a white turban or a white hat or jeans and a button down. They are not there to necessarily stretch or strengthen their bodies. They're there for some sort of perceived awakening of Kundalini energy. I've been to those experiences and I've enjoyed them. It's not particularly my style, but my husband Brett will say, and I think this is a quote from Yogi Bhajan, but it's something like, if you want to get to your destination in 10 years, you practice Hatha Yoga. If you want to get to your destination in 1 year, you practice Kundalini Yoga. So, the idea is that you take a jet plane when you do Kundalini instead of taking an Uber or something when you do other kinds. So that's the purported, benefit or effect of Kundalini Yoga by the guy who made it up. So, take that, right. Take that with a grain of salt, that he wants you to do Kundalini. Well, he's passed now, but he wanted you to do Kundalini because it fed a foundation that was a family business. He comes from a wealthy family business. So there's a little bit, if you dig deep into Yogi Bhajan, there's a few icky things about that, but I'm not particularly well versed. I also know that Kundalini Yoga is supposed to be for a householder, which I am, Audrey is, you probably are too. It's just someone who tends to the things of the house, the family. So it's not the person who can go on retreat for 6 months out of the year or do a 40-day silent meditation. It's not for that ascetic person. And those are rare and few and far between these days. So again, it was supposed to be for householders so that we could get a perceived benefit quicker than other styles of yoga.
It does have this interesting feel to, like the DVDs I was watching had this interesting kind of like feel to it, but it's like I didn't understand, like, well, why is that supposed to awaken the Kundalini when? So it's like I'm going through like all these different instructor DVDs and then I'm rating them. So I'm writing down all the ones that I do and I rate them, and I have like this really open mind to the Kundalini, but I keep rating them really lowly. So it's like I end up taking them all back to the library, and I still have like Sean Korn, Shiva Ray, and a few other ones still, and I'll continue to keep getting more. It was like I know that for sure I can feel like, and like I started out, and it wasn't like my jiu-jitsu teacher was explaining this. Well, he explained like the microcosmic orbit, and he was saying like forget about Kundalini, but like you can feel like the energy come up your spine. You can like contract around the perineum, pull it up a little bit. It's like same thing as like Mula Bandha, and I can feel it come up, and then like around the top of my head, and then like it stops at the third eye spot, and then the microcosmic orbit, it's supposed to go down the front. And there's been like sometimes when I've felt it go down more pronounced, but usually it seems like kind of fade. So it's like, okay, well, what does that fade mean? But I know for sure I can feel it going up my spine into my brain. I can do it almost at will. So it's like I'm trying to figure out, what is that exactly? Is there like some other kind of explanation that doesn't even matter? If there is another explanation, is there a better practice? But at my jiu-jitsu class, we would just sit in Seiza, just Zen meditation, and just over time, this stuff just starts to happen. And even though he didn't really talk about it, then I learned that like if you do get into these other practices, whether it's Kundalini or tantric stuff, that it's the same process. So you can just kind of like sit there, and it's not really about like like doing like cat-cow to open up the chakras. Like cat-cow is good for the spine for sure, and maybe that does have some kind of significance because we would do that there too as part of the warm-up. But so it's like if that isn't real, do you see like the benefits of the Kundalini classes, like having the same? You said they're like strength and stretching, but like in your classes, whether you believe any of the esoteric stuff or not, it's going to have this physical stuff that actually works. So I guess I don't know what my question is exactly, just except like for myself, I want stuff that I can prove. So I quit doing these other DVDs that are like, all right, I don't know for sure if this is real or not, and I kind of feel silly doing it. But this other stuff, I put in the Sean Korn DVD, and it feels good. I can see how I'm making these connections better. And so it sounds like that you two have just stuck with the stuff that you can really prove, and then it becomes the gateway, like you were talking about, if they get into
Truly.
These other things.
Yeah, I mean, you go to your first yoga class and you come out and you feel so amazing. You're like, I don't know how or what, but it worked. Whatever that was, that thing, so it gets you. I mean, and it's not always the first time for a class. I probably took 10 classes before I thought, okay, this is something that I want to pursue and find out more about. And some of that has to do with how it's presented, what you're going through at the time in your life. I know when I first, and I forgot about this from earlier, is that, my husband and I were going through infertility, and so I needed the quiet mind aspect of it, but I was invited to an Ashtanga class. Well, it just kicked my ass all over the place, and that's not what I needed. I was already kicking myself, being hard on myself because of what was going on in my head and my body. So I needed something to help calm me down. So once I found the teacher that was right, that said, we're looking for ease in these things, not making it harder. That was like the gateway drug for me then. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't mean to necessarily diminish that Kundalini practitioners aren't always stretching and strengthening, because they do some amazing things,
I've been so
you know.
sore after a Kundalini class.
Leg lifts
sure.
and those hollow body holds,
Yeah.
and flapping your arms for 6 minutes without stopping. That can be intense, but and there must be some effect of enhanced blood flow to certain areas of the body and things like that. But yeah, for right now, I just like exploring all different kinds of movements, and every once in a while I do put a little Kundalini Kriya in my class. We did one this weekend because it related to other things that we were doing. So I hope the Kundalini people don't mind me that I take a Kriya every once in a while and throw it into a Vinyasa flow class, but it's, we're hybridizing all the time in yoga and in movement practices for the most part, or, a lot of them anyway. Yeah.
So are you getting more or less into the philosophies of yoga? Are you reading more than you used to, or less, or if so, what are you reading, or what books had an influence on you? Or
I love my yoga bookshelf. I've been admiring it. Even today, I was just admiring it. So I'm a book nerd, though, so books suit me well. I know plenty of very, very intelligent people who are not readers, and, I honor them for that. But I for sure, ever since I was a small child, I've always been a voracious reader. And I like to read, I guess it is philosophy right now. But I'll like a good asana book as well. So I kind of tend not to discriminate. I read a beautiful book just recently called The Unbelievable Happiness of What Is. And I can't tell you the author. It might be John Burney, but I could be wrong. But it's called The Unbelievable Happiness of What Is. And I told a yoga class, I've read a ton of self-help or philosophy or mindfulness books, and this one's in my top 3. So I recommend it. It's really easy to read. He's a martial artist out of the Bay Area, and also a practitioner of the Alexander technique, which is kind of similar to Rolfing. It's body therapy that a lot of musicians, actors, and athletes use to become more embodied through what's being asked of them in their careers. So it deals a lot with finding good postural alignment through body work. And so, yes, this book, The Unbelievable Happiness of What Is, really spoke to me. The chapters are only 2 pages long, so there's maybe 30 chapters, and it was it tells me everything that I already know, but in a really easy to digest and just powerful way. It was a really good book. So yeah, I love yoga philosophy books. I love meditation books. My husband studies a lot more of Vedic and Hindu and Tantra and Ayurveda, so we've got numerous bookshelves dedicated to that. And whereas I'm more of a hands-on, I like body work books, I like mindfulness books and asana and teaching methodology books.
Yeah,
yours, Audrey?
I'm sitting with a yoga assist book with Sharon Gannon and David Life, Jivamukti originators, it's just a matter of going back over those things, going back to the beginning a lot of times for me. I enjoy revisiting. And then Kelly Starrett, The Supple Leopard, is the most recent thing that I've dove into. It's very helpful. His techniques, working with the people at the gym. I teach yoga at a CrossFit gym. So yeah, helping those folks get the knots out has been great, because yoga is not always so welcome. They do have what's called ROMWOD for people that do CrossFit, because it's called the WOD, the workout of the day. And so you can buy this channel and do these basically yin poses where they sell it to people to do that. But sometimes the full-on yin, 4 to 6 minutes or so in a pose, then they're so stiff they can't get out of the pose. So we do some work with tennis balls, lacrosse balls, foam rollers, that kind of thing too. Lisa and I both have an interest in Thai yoga massage, so I have lots of books on that. Different levels, different techniques, and then do some workshops in that area too. Neck and shoulder massage, front body, back body. Yeah. So.
Have you heard of Michaela Edwards?
I've not.
She wrote, her system is called a Yoga Line. And she, it's a really good book. It's at the library in Indianapolis, or I have it. I've had it for a long time. I just keep renewing it. But she's been a teacher for a long time. I think she's in her 50s at least, and been teaching for a long time, and then saw how people are getting injured with what was, I guess you'd call it traditional American practice, if that's fair to say. But so she's not doing shoulder stands anymore. And she's encouraging other people not to, because it can like straighten out your cervical spine, which causes problems, and maybe not for everybody, but it could. And if you're doing like a forward fold, it's okay to bend your knees. Maybe it's better to bend your knees.
Hip hinging rather than
and
sure.
And not trying to like pry the joints apart. So I'm trying to like look at people that are it's always cool to see who's like new on the scene and cool and different, like strength and conditioning stuff. There's always cool new things to look at and people to study. But for a lot of this stuff, I'm looking at like, okay, who's been doing this for 20 or 30 years and sharing it from that point of view.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, you can do this hardcore Ashtanga stuff and maybe get injured along the way. Maybe these prying the joints apart to as a way of like transformation instead of like maybe it's just on some level it's supposed to be better for you like mentally than physically, because you're trying to not transform, transcend the body. So that's why it's okay to pry somebody's foot behind their head and put them into this pain so they can deal with the rest of their life better. But then, they're dealing with some kind of joint issue too that was unnecessary. So that's like a lot of what I'm looking at is who's been doing this stuff for a long time and had to share. So it's cool to have both of you on that have been, so far into this practice, and you have both of you have said like not trying to go into these extreme ways, or maybe if it's like these one-on-one sessions that you're doing, then maybe that person is ready for some hand balance that has a lot of flexibility requirement or something like that. So we're getting close to like an hour 40 here. It goes so fast. Do you, I'm not in any hurry, but do you, so I could let each of you just kind of like take it. I don't have any other questions right now, but other than like, what do you like want to leave people with, or what other things would you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. It did go by fast, and it was a really nice conversation, so thanks. I appreciate it. I think, I'm just happy to be here on planet Earth and happy to be doing something that I love. Every time I sometimes I step in front of a class and I'm not quite available, but I always end the class, something happens, just like it might happen for the practitioner. Something happens and I always walk out of a yoga class, teaching it or taking it, feeling a little bit moved, a little bit changed, a little bit transformed, most often in a good way. And I guess I'll just plug that I lead a couple yoga retreats, and retreats are, while we don't pick luxurious places, but the experience of giving yourself a yoga retreat can be luxurious in that it's not, it's usually a chunk of change that you have to put down to attend a retreat. But in doing so, you're kind of prioritizing certain things for yourself, like prioritizing that taking care of yourself is important, and experiencing new things or having an adventure is important. So, I don't want it to ever feel like an elitist thing, because I know sometimes it can. And I want it to be accessible to people. So I really try to keep that in mind when I plan a yoga retreat. So we go places that are a little bit off the beaten path. I don't mind a beach vacation, that's for sure. But I usually try to pick places that are just a little bit different. So my friend Danielle Nolan and I, and maybe you want to have Danielle on your podcast sometime too. She's great. She and I just got back from Guatemala last month on a yoga retreat that was really interesting and awesome and successful. And we had a really good time. So yeah, Guatemala, and then my heart is in Arizona. So I lead yoga retreats to Arizona and have one coming up in July to Sedona, Arizona. And it's the second annual time going to Sedona. So we go to Sedona for a long weekend. I try again to keep in mind that not everyone can take a week off work. Maybe you can just take 3 days off work and hug it around a weekend. And so that's happening this July. We all stay in a home together, which is really fun, and cook and eat our meals together, which I think makes it a little different than going to like resorts or something. So we try to keep it really, really, really friendly and good vibes and powerful transformations that can happen on retreats where you've literally left things behind. Your family, your friends, your job, your home, and you're going and you're kind of putting yourself in this new situation with maybe a group of people that you don't know, and through that, some powerful effects can happen. So yeah, Sedona and other places in Arizona.
How do people get a hold of you if they want to take your classes or go to your retreats?
Thanks. Through social media is a good way. I'm on Facebook a lot, and my name is Lisa, Lisa, Daugherty, Daugherty. You can find me at City Yoga as well, and that website, cityyoga.biz, and City Yoga is all one word, CITYOGA, cityyoga.biz. Those are probably the two best ways to find me. Thanks.
Good.
Audrey?
I don't have any workshops or cool retreats, sorry. I teach at Blooming Life in Zionsville and Simply Yoga in Zionsville. I offer workshops, Thai massage workshops, and also on empowered midlife. So people that are experiencing that time between birthing children, raising young kids, and taking care of your parents, and you're somewhere in the middle. So having workshops around that kind of thing of how to care for yourself and care for those around you at the same time.
Are you receiving Thai massage clients
Absolutely, as always. Thank you, dear.
And your contact info?
Yeah, also I'm on Facebook, Audrey Jo Ellery McCann, McCann. But Blooming Life Yoga, you can see my schedule there. And thanks for having us. This has been fun. I love this woman dearly, and collaboration is something that she likes working on, and so I thought, let's collaborate on this. So thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was really nice to have you on. I really appreciate it. You both have an open invitation to come on again. If you have some other subjects you want to talk about or get more into different aspects of yoga or whatever else, a Thai massage, talk about that, or whatever more you want to talk about is good with me. So thanks again for coming on, and thanks for listening to the show. If you want to get a hold of me about training or the show, you can do so at fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com. Any other closing thoughts?
That's it. Shanti, shanti, shanti.
Yeah. Nice. Peace out.
That's a good way to end it. Thanks.